Good day, YouTubers, or good evening, depending on what part of the globe you are residing in. I hope the Lord is blessing you so that you can glorify Him with your gratitude in the way that you speak, the way that you think, the way that you deal with your fellow human companion, or should I say even your neighbour. And that's interesting. Who is your neighbour? Is it the person who lives in a house next door to you, or is it the person you pass in the street? Because irrespective of whether these people are your enemies or your friends, you should glorify God in the way that you deal with them. I want to bring up a subject that I wonder how many people, professing Christians even, actually consider. And it's a subject of knowing the ending from the beginning. You see, that we read in God's Word that He Himself actually declares, I am revealing the ending from the beginning. So, in summation, when you work your way through the Holy Bible, you come to the realization that man is inherently wicked. There is a free gift of salvation, and that's through the shed blood of our Heavenly Father's Son, Yeshua's shed blood. It's a free gift which is offered to all of mankind. All that's required of us is to acknowledge, to give thanks, and to glorify Him in the way that we deal with one another. No religious observance, just acknowledging that we are all sinners, and yet our sins can be washed clean, even to the point of, as it says, our robes, our filthy rags of righteousness can become white, pure white, through His shed blood, because it covers all transgressions. But there's so many reassuring things in God's words that people either tend to overlook or deliberately actually either ignore or don't even bring up. I was thinking the other day when a brother came round, the SDA brother, although I think he's slowly realising that all organised religion is actually a tool of the beast, and we should heed the warning that God says to get out of her lest we share in her plagues. Anyway, I mentioned how Paul said all things are permissible. Some of you think like, what do you mean by that? Well, as he said all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. So therefore, it is permissible that you can get drunk. It isn't necessarily going to be beneficial though, is it? Because if you continually get drunk, what happens? Your body breaks down through the alcohol abuse, and you suffer things like either coronary, in other words a heart attack, or thrombosis, or pickled liver, apart from other possibilities like diabetes and so on. And also your mental well-being is affected. And remember how the Bible says to be sober-minded. Why do we need to be sober-minded? Because, as it says, Satan is prowling the streets like a roaring lion, seeking whom he can devour. He just loves it when we're at our weakest spiritually, because that's when he can attack us the most effectively. When our trust and faith in God is strong, as it says, we can approach the throne boldly now because of it's a throne of grace. But it seems that still nothing's changed. People still want to follow works. But I digress. Let's get to the subject at hand. Knowing the ending from the beginning. Well, you know these talks usually end up with me sharing someone's writings on the subject. So today I'd like to share from a book called Black Sun, Blood Moon by S Douglas Woodward. Here it is. It's heavy going, but it raises some very good points. So let's deal with this subject of knowing the ending at the beginning. Quoting from the Book of Enoch, chapter 1, verses 1, 3, 4, 7 and 9, we read. Now you may say, oh, how come you're quoting from the Book of Enoch? Well, the early church considered it was part of the canon, but it was only people like Augustine and, don't get me wrong, I might be wrong about people like Eusebius and so on, but a lot of the early Catholic popes who decided what should be in and what shouldn't. Now, many theologians will tell you like, well, yes, but that's the whole idea of the canon. It was a measuring rod. Yes, but was that a measuring rod that was presented or given by our Heavenly Father, or was it a measuring rod given by man, who, when he read certain things, said, "Oh, that couldn't possibly be inspired by God"? Yes, there are. I think there are some Gnostic Gospels. I've seen some of them. Like, for instance, the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, which really all it is just a collection of what Jesus said while he walked the earth, and doesn't actually bring anything new to the table. And the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, now that's a bit of a different story, because that tends to give a different character to Jesus. Now, you see, many people like to say, well, it was all written by men, and obviously, there was agendas and that sort of thing. Well, we can think that if we don't believe that, God gives us inspiration, because I believe he does. See, we tend to allow our pride and ego to control our lives, where when we think of something, we say, oh, that was a great idea, that was all my doing, yeah, not thinking that maybe God put the idea into our minds. Yes, you see, remember it says that the promise is that God will satisfy the desires of our heart. Now, think about this, yeah. All good things, it says, come from the Lord, yeah. So if there's here we go. Excuse me for a minute. Now I've got to quickly plug in before the power goes. Sorry about the interruption there. I won't bore you with the details. Well, I'll just mention it. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have problems with your PC or well, not necessarily a PC, but I mean, in this case, this is a laptop. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I find it so infuriating, so frustrating, so annoying. I mean, today I spent probably about 2.5 hours trying to find out why I had no sound, and it didn't matter how many times I restarted. Didn't have and not just restarting, but literally rebooting. That's powering off and powering on again. And I went online, and I sometimes wonder, what is the point of these forums? Because I see, possibly genuine people asking questions, like saying, "Oh, please help me. This I'm not a technical guy, and this has happened to my computer." And then you'll get someone who'll come on, and they go through the step-by-step things, and I think, well, yes, I've done all that, but there's no provision after that for saying, like, yes, when you've gone through all of those checks, that this is what you must do now if the computer tells you everything's running fine, but it's not, because you still have no sound. I mean, it just beggars belief that there's nothing there, is there? I mean, and you'll find that they just seem to like these communications or these dialogues, that they just die dead. There's no follow-up. There's no. You're just left there hanging, thinking like, well, what happened there then? So did the guy get his problem resolved? And one, I thought, this is interesting. The guys, I mean, I realised after reading through it that actually it didn't apply to me, because it wasn't Windows 7. It was actually Vista. But then he makes it. He says, "Oh, my girlfriend's just solved the problem. Yes, we've got sound again. Hooray!" And I think, great. What I mean? But that doesn't help me or any other one who's in the position where suddenly there's no sound, and you go through the thing, you do the troubleshooting, and it's telling me everything's working fine. You think, well, so why is there no sound then? You know, I mean, I've got a problem with my Media Monkey as well. Like, sometimes it plays, sometimes it doesn't. You know, I mean, it's not all the time, but this is what I find most infuriating. I mean, you'll get something like 3 or 4 days, no problem, and then there's a problem. Like the other weekend, oh great, I had to do a system restore. I mean, I'm so grateful that, you know, I've realised now that a lot of it is like the software companies are covering their backside by saying, well, you might lose programs when you do this, you know. And that it's a big might, because I found actually I didn't lose any programs when I did a system restore, but I had to do it because I couldn't sign in. I couldn't even access the computer. You know, the thing fired up okay, but I couldn't. There was no, you know, literally it was a black screen. You know, I thought, what do I do? You know what I mean? You know. In fact, I'm so grateful that, you know, that God has given me the wherewithal that I can literally have more than one computer, because I literally have to keep on doing that. You know. Migrating from one to another, backwards and forwards. Anyway, enough of my rantings about, what should we say, the pitfalls of PC use. I think it's the best way to describe it. So, getting back to the subject in hand. The word of the blessing of Enoch, with which he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. Concerning the elect I said, as I began my story concerning them, the Holy Great One will come out from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread on the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear in the strength of his might from heaven, and the earth shall be wholly torn apart, and all that is on the earth shall be destroyed, and there shall be a judgment on all. And behold, he comes with 10,000 of his holy ones, to execute judgment on all, and to destroy all the ungodly or wicked, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. That's a pretty truthful account of the state of the human race, if you think about it. You know, I cultivate an attitude of like, God is not to blame for anything. All the wickedness, all the suffering, all the grotesque and horrible things that go on in this earth is from the heart of man. You know, as the Bible rightly says, you know, the human heart, who can understand it? Out of it all wickedness comes. You know, slander, lies, false accusations, manipulation, coercion. You know, I mean, an example that, you know, and I think if we are really, you know, trying to, or should I say, you know, allowing God's love to work through us, then no matter what the situation, no matter what the subject, you know, we should be, you know, well, as I was, moved to tears by it. I mean, here's a thing that I never knew about, and this happened quite a few years ago. It actually happened in 2007, but it's within the youth culture. Now, I don't know how, you know, other Christians perceive young folk, but, you know, I see them as like, I was young once, you know, I made some silly, you know, decisions, you know, but I also embraced, you know, certain youth cultures, lifestyles, what you want to call it, you know. But I'd always been an outsider. I'd always been more of an observer than a participator. I mean, by this I mean that even when I was a hippie, yes, I mean I believed in the hippie ideals, but I didn't, you know, go and live in a commune or, you know, regularly take drugs, you know, it's like a 24/7 thing, you know, whether it was acid or marijuana or speed or whatever like. Yes, I dabbled in those things, I indulged in those things, you know, usually first of all as a exploration and then, you know, as a practical side of things. When I mean practical, I mean like the use of speed, for instance. I used speed because it was like it would enable me to do more things, you know, although actually on reflection a lot of it was manic and you know, when you're on speed you don't have full how you say, command of your faculties. I mean, yes, it will keep you going, so to speak, but it doesn't you know, it doesn't enhance your performance in any way whatsoever. In fact, sometimes it actually how you say, it mars it, because you're thinking over time. You can't focus on one thing at one time. Your head's all over the place, and you become actually quite disorganized actually. But of course, I wanted to burn the candle at both ends. I was into the rave scene at the time, and I was working weekends to get a bit of extra money, and so that's what I would do. I'd work the weekend, but I'd go raving on the Saturday night, and then straight into work the following day. And whether I actually managed to achieve much on the Sunday, I'm not quite sure, because it was so manic, and. But yeah, at the time I didn't give it much thought. I felt I could handle it and so on, and at least I didn't become manic and like some people I knew who actually end up with psychosis through heavy use of speed. Hence, and if you remember the song by Canned Heat, for those of an old 60s 70s persuasion, where they actually, I think it was the song Amphetamine Annie, where they, one of the lines actually says, speed kills, But so I'm digressing there, but anyway, so there you go. So there's Enoch, inspired by God to, as he says, to bless those. That means us, in this time of tribulation. Whilst on that subject, it's been the last days ever since Jesus went back to heaven, yeah. So, let's get that out of the thing. But the way people are trying to impress it, it's all going to end. It just amazed me, this latest revelation. We got this Zionist Rabbi Jonathan Kahn saying that, linking the Shemitah. To be honest, I'm quite ignorant about Jewish fables and Talmudic belief systems and so on. But yes, he's trying. I think it's. I haven't really looked into it that closely, but I know he's given a date. He's given a date. I think it's the 13th of April. Apparently, it's all going to end on the 13th of April. Well, see, this is it, isn't it? How do we, explain then what the scripture says about how, the beast will the man of lawlessness will be revealed, yeah, and how the whole world will wander after him. So how can it all be done in a matter of a couple of months? We're told there is a time scale in Revelation, I've come to a different realization now, but that's what I always say to people. I said I try and keep an open mind on these things, because what did Paul say? He says we all look through a glass darkly. In other words, we don't know everything. We actually clutch at straws a lot of the time, but as you know, many professional Christians, this is this and that is that. There's like certain characters on here, isn't it, that actually point fingers at certain celebrities, and he's with the Illuminati, and look at all the Illuminati symbolism and so on, But who are we to judge? Who are we to point fingers? Who are we to turn and say that person is wicked? We don't know their hearts. We don't know their lives. We see a public persona, but we don't know what they're like in private. Maybe they do get up to all kinds of wickedness in private. I don't know, but who are we to be pointing fingers? To me, these are just modern day Pharisees. Because remember how even when Jesus was doing wonderful miracles, what did the Pharisees say? Oh, he has a demon. They didn't want to see anything good in anything that Jesus did while he walked the earth. It's even implication Jesus himself knew that most of the people came to him for the miracles, for the free food and so on. They didn't want to hear the message. But look how loving he was, even when he was going through that agony on the cross. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. See, we have to adopt that same kind of mentality. So, going back to this thing about this, youth culture thing. I never knew about this, but it doesn't surprise me, because I know that sadly amongst young people there's this tribal mentality, and I belong to this tribe and you belong to that tribe and we're sworn enemies. For whatever reason I don't know. I really can't see how a lifestyle, musical choice, and that sort of thing can actually alienate one youngster from another. But anyway, it's about this young girl. She was only 20. Her name's her name was Sophie Lancaster, and she was an emo goth, yeah, and she was living a reasonably, I think probably quite a mild life. I mean, I don't think she was into any heavy drugs or anything like that, and I don't think she was into any kind of, Satanism or any of that kind of thing, although, see, I still, this thing about colours, I still have a feeling this. I mean, I wish someone would actually, do something about, what is it about colours, how colours have been used throughout history to designate certain things. I mean, we know that, like red, danger and so on, like, or blood or whatever, like, yeah. Black, darkness, I mean, think about it, yeah. I mean, the SS, they wore all black, didn't they, yeah? So you can imagine now they must have been quite an imposing figure. When you saw these black uniformed people coming, knocking on your door, you immediately felt intimidated, and think it graduated from the brown, because they were the brown shirts. Now, were they brown shirts because that was supposed to give the idea that they were men of the earth and, for the people, etc., etc.? I don't know. I mean, I'd love someone to give me some feedback on this, because it's still, because I went through a period when going on my spiritual journey where I got involved with Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism, which, as you know, it's a chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo thing, like, and but I found that if I focused on certain colours, it seemed to change perception and my circumstances, even interaction with people. And I thought about this, and I thought, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is all in my imagination, ego, I don't know, but I felt that certain colours, and I thought about this and thought, yeah, isn't it interesting how, sound like in a cinema, yeah, you'll have, like, if I remember correctly, but some maybe, but you used the old entry and exit signs. I mean, entry used to be green, or even the exit. That's it. Emergency exit was green. I think something. Either way, you know what I mean. And like red was being like no entry or whatever. Yeah, like with think about it. Like with traffic lights. Yeah, apparently, I can't remember the guy's name now, but that was actually yet another case of someone had the idea and someone else stole it, and they got all the credit, and the other person was totally. But apparently. Was actually a black man who actually threw up the idea of the traffic light. This concept of having a red light, which means stop, and then the yellow light, proceed if it's safe to go, and green light, all systems go. You're it's safe for you to proceed. But so this whole thing with colour. So anyways, as I say, going back to this girl, so she liked to have red and black dreads. Now, when I always look at the red and black combination, I think, well, every time we look at that, what do we inherently see? We see wickedness, attached to it. Yeah, if we look at like the vampire, yeah, Dracula, yeah, what does he wear? He wears a black cape, but it has a red lining. Yeah, if we look at the Catholic Church, you have the ones that dress in black, and the ones that dress in red, and the ones that dress in white. I think that's like the Pope sometimes dresses all in white. I think most of the time he dresses in white, because obviously he's God's emissary on earth. God only speaks for him, like, so obviously he's pure and perfect, like it. I think guess again on that one. But anyway, so going back to so sadly, like her and her boyfriend, they decide to take a shortcut through a local park. I can't remember where it was now. I think it was somewhere in Lancashire. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name. Balcap, I think, or something like that. Anyway, some of you out there, correct me on this. Yeah, I mean, please, leave a comment. Be much appreciated. But so anyway, they were passing through, and there was I don't know what you would call them, chavs, whatever, like maybe because this happened in 2007, so I imagine that these other youth might have been into dubstep or whatever, like Anyway, as the police kept on with their investigations, it turned out that this gang of 5 youths had been drinking. Apparently, they'd even been conducting in underage sex as well. Like, but either way, they were tanked up. They were looking for a fight, and when the couple came through, they just jumped on them, and you know, I think apparently that's what it said. You know, she loved her boyfriend so much that she wouldn't leave him, and she's crying out for help. And you know, and I think actually there was some young girls apparently who were nearby and they heard the screams and everything, but they didn't do anything about it, as far as I can remember. But either way, you know, it was to think that they then turned on her, and you know, they, as it said, what was it? One of the kids actually, you know, because obviously now they soon, the gang soon splits up, and you get those who want to try and, you know, take the easy route, so they start, you know, embellishing on what the others did, and you know, I didn't know a part of it. Like, well, I think they're all guilty anyway. But either way, so apparently this is that they'd stomped on her head, they kicked her head like a football, and you know, she was so badly injured that she didn't survive. The boyfriend did, you know, obviously badly scarred by both emotionally and physically. But so what a senseless slaughter, you know, just because of the differences in you know, musical tastes and dress sense and style, you know. But that really did move me to tears, you know what I mean, to think a life taken like that, you know what I mean. But you know, the mother's been amazing. Like, she definitely must have, you know, God's spirit within her, because she hasn't sought revenge, you know, even though there was a court case, and yes, they, you know, I think they, what was it, did 10 years, I think they did. So actually, yeah, they'll probably be due for, you know, release next year, I guess. But yeah, so she's actually formed this foundation. It's called the Sophie Foundation, and I like the way she's taken her name and she's actually turned it into an anagram, and it stands for Stamp Out Prejudice, Hatred, Intolerance Everywhere. You know, and you know, it's been, you know, that's what they've been doing. They've been trying to go around and, you know, get used to, you know, to understand that each have different, you know, we're all different. We all, you know, perceive things differently and express ourselves differently. You know, in fact, I think that's a wonderful thing, the way God made us. You know what I mean? We can all perceive things a different way. You know, He just wants us to, as it says, agree to disagree. Yeah, you know. Yeah, so, you know. So there's an example of pure wickedness. Let's continue. One of the great ploys for mystery movie plots is foreshadowing the end at the beginning, when the viewer can't possibly know how the foreshadowing relates to the story as a whole. After this so-called reveal is complete, but without explanation to its meaning, the movie then goes back in time to where the story really begins. At this point, the viewer becomes engrossed in a story, if it's a good one. For the next 2 hours or so, the movie director does his or her best to make the viewer completely forget about what happened at the movie's outset. Once the finale arrives, the foreshadowing event appears unexpectedly. The viewer is shocked how the conclusion was clearly shown at the beginning, yet the viewer didn't remember or relate what they saw early on in the story as it unfolded. When this ploy is twisted just right, the viewer may be dumbfounded at just how he or she was tricked by the director's storytelling genius. Being misled in this way makes for a great tale and a satisfying mystery movie experience. Believe me, I have been fooled more times than not. I don't know whether I have. I wouldn't say that I've, you know, sussed it out at the beginning. I mean, I've just always thought, well, you know, let's follow the story and, you know, see the people's motives and characters, and, you know, and as the saying goes, all will be revealed. Yeah. So one of the great mysteries in biblical studies is the place and value of the Book of Enoch. Like a good mystery plot, Enoch is a very old book, considered to be between 2,200 to 5,000 years old, which begins by providing information directed far into the future concerning the end of the world. The author addresses himself to the elect, a rare phrase in the canonical Hebrew Bible, as we will see. Moreover, what's so intriguing, if not ironic, Enoch speaks of those living at the end of history, although Enoch lived at history's beginning. How could someone at the beginning know about the end? The Book of Enoch has become a very popular book over the past 100 years. It's even referenced by Freemasonry. Sometimes we hear tell of a special type of magic, or known as Enochian magic, which, as we will see, makes reference to the god Hermes and the general magical system known as Hermeticism. Both systems of magic connect humankind to the religion of Egypt. Enoch like Melchizedek, described as the priest and king of Salem in Genesis and the Book of Hebrews, is indeed a mysterious character. The story and traditions surrounding Enoch are considerable. In some mythologies, Enoch is seen as the planner and originator of the Great Pyramids of Egypt. This theory suggests that since the pyramids were undeniably built before the flood, the people who built the pyramids were not Egyptian. These traditions suggest the pyramids were known as the Pillars of Enoch. Additionally, Enoch may have been the real person behind the god Thoth, the Egyptian version of the Greek god Hermes. Since Enoch was thought to be the originator of writing, this mythical god Thoth inherited this attribute, supposedly creating written communication. With a small leap, the ancients came to regard him as heaven's messenger. Regarding Enochian magic, it is a system of ceremonial magic based on the evocation and commanding of various spirits. It is based on the 16th century writings of Dr. John Dee, the original 007, by the way. That was his monogram, or what they call it. And Edward Kelly, who claimed that their information was delivered to them directly by various angels. Dee's journal contained the Enochian script and the table of correspondence that goes with it. It claims to embrace secrets contained within the apocryphal Book of Enoch. For inquiring minds, ancient Jewish wisdom, according to my rabbi, Daniel Lapin, asserts Shem, the son of Noah, was this priest. Sorry, that's a link to another part. Let's carry on. Many interpret Isaiah 19:19 in connection with Enoch. Their contention is the Giza pyramids were originally monuments to Enoch's God and the God of Adam and Noah. In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. The pyramids lie upon the border which exists between Upper and Lower Egypt. Additionally, since they contain no hieroglyphics anywhere on their many vast inner and outer walls, some speculate their purpose was not to entomb mummies of the kings. Instead, they appear to encase ancient wisdom, as their extraordinary dimensions incorporate mathematical knowledge about the world's geography, knowledge vastly beyond the grasp of early humankind. Even the notion of pi, which is 3.14159, appears intentionally constructed within the ratios of these megalithic buildings, dating almost 3,000 years before Christ walked the earth. However, connecting Isaiah's statement to the Egyptian pyramids may be a stretch, given that the Giza pyramids existed at least 2,000 years before Isaiah, and since the context of Isaiah 19 infers a time far into the future when the Egyptians speak the language of Canaan, perhaps that's Arabic, are judged by God but then healed by him. Along with Assyria, at this future time Egypt is under the authority of Israel, which has never transpired before. God speaks of all three peoples representing 1/3 of his entire earthbound family, reflecting upon the unity of all of Semitic peoples, specifically Abraham's offspring, all of which were to be blessed by God. He has another book out, by the way, as he says, if you want this discussion on pyramids, then you need to look at Decoding Doomsday. He also talks about the Arabic developed from ancient Aramaic, the language of Jesus and the language of Canaan. Today it is a melting pot of language spoken throughout most of the Middle East, bequeathing many words to Spanish, Portuguese and other European languages. As Alexander the Great enforced the Greek language upon most of the known world in the 4th century before Christ, Muhammad and his followers imposed this language across the Islamic nations in the 8th century AD and forward. Likewise, in today's discussions of prophecy, the Book of Enoch often pops up. As we will see, there are many absorbing themes in the book. We know it's quoted in the New Testament by both Jude and Peter, yet it's not a part of the Protestant or Catholic Holy Bible. The early church was clearly split on its authenticity and its position in the canon. Those who comment on it in our time suggest the book is much like Daniel and Revelation, that it is apocalyptic in nature. It speaks about the horrible judgments which will come to humanity at world's end. Many of the so-called church fathers treated the book as sacred. Like Peter and Jude, they quoted the book in their writings. We find this true of Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Origen and Clement of Alexandria. Tertullian, from 160–230 AD, especially considered the book to be Holy Scripture. Indeed, the Ethiopian Coptic Church preserves and upholds the book as part of its official canon to this day. On the other hand, the early fathers, that's Hilary, Jerome and Augustine, challenged its authenticity. As a result, for almost 1,400 years the book was supposedly lost to Western Christianity. It wasn't found again until a Scottish explorer, James Bruce, went to Ethiopia at the end of the 18th century upon hearing rumours of its existence there. Bruce brought back 3 copies of the book written in the Ethiopian language. Scholars suggest that the text was originally Aramaic and may have been translated into Greek before being rendered into the Ethiopian language. The first English translation was published by Richard Lawrence in 1821. Another edition, more famous than Lawrence's, was printed by R.H. Charles in 1912. Thereafter, a Greek text surfaced, followed by an Aramaic version discovered in a cave, in Cave 4 at Qumran, as part of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. And apparently this recap is taken from Joseph B. Lumpkin's intro to his version of the Book of Enoch, a transliteration, which was published in May of 2004. The book is traced to at least the 2nd century BC and may have been written much earlier. In fact, there are suggestions by some, perhaps romantically, that the book, or the first portion of it, was written by Enoch himself prior to the time of the flood. Some authorities considered Enoch to have been the first human to have developed the language known as Proto Hebrew. As noted before, tradition indicates that he was the originator of written language altogether. We do know that the Proto Hebrew alphabet was similar to early forms of Greek and Phoenician alphabets. Indeed, these 3 very ancient non-pictorial languages show many similarities. All 3 are based on symbols representing sounds rather than pictures, as in hieroglyphs. These languages appear to date to at least 1650 BC. It's likely that commerce between the Greeks, Phoenicians and Hebrews was the catalyst for the growth and development of these alphabets, also known as writing systems, during the century before King Solomon, who lived around 1000 BC. If in fact Enoch wrote the original, or portions of it, this would push the dating back to 3000 BC. As I've noted earlier, biblical genealogy suggests the flood of Noah occurred approximately 2350 BC. If the Book of Enoch was in board Noah's boat, logically it would have been penned before that date. So, when was Enoch born, and how long did he live? Jewish authorities suggest that Enoch was born in the Jewish year 622. Of course, Jewish dates begin with the birth of Adam in year 1, which works out to our 4004 BC, according to a number of sources. Moses indicates that Enoch lived for 365 years, and then God took him, a mystery about which we will talk more in a moment. This would place Enoch's disappearance from the earth at about 988 in the Jewish calendar. That's around 3000 BC. The flood was about 650 plus years later. Just for context, Abraham lived about 1000 years after Enoch, around 2000 BC, and 1000 years before Solomon. A simple, rounded timeline may help frame the chronology. So in 4000 BC we have Adam's creation. Then in 3000 BC Enoch is translated. Then in 2350 BC we have the flood of Noah. And then in 2000 BC we have Abraham called out by God from the land of Ur. And at 1000 BC Solomon builds the temple. And then at 1 BC the birth of Jesus. On the other hand, given the Christian New Testament quotes Enoch towards the end of the 1st century, probably around the time Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, the book would have been known and revered well before that time, as included in the Essenes community confirms. If you want to look at a book by Sheldon Epstein, Bernard Dickman and Yona Wilamowski called Dating Discrepancies in the Hebrew Calendar, they have composed, it's a trio of educators whose joint works on biblical and Talmudic topics appear in Tradition, Higayon, and Location Sciences. That's, I think that might be 2 books, I'm not quite sure. And regarding the Essenes, that was a Jewish sect that assembled the Dead Sea Scrolls in around 40 AD. Therefore, although admitting it's a quixotic notion that the book was written by the actual Enoch, nevertheless it was certainly written well before the time of Jesus. Surprisingly, although written at least 200 years before the Christian New Testament, it foreshadowed the beliefs of the Christian community regarding events such as the rapture, the return of the Messiah with his saints, and the Great Tribulation at the end of time. Was the book shared by Christians and Jews? Yes, but only for a time. Merely to speak of God literally walking on the earth would disqualify the Book of Enoch from consideration by the Jewish rabbis, as they finalized their canon in the 2nd century AD, about 100 years following the destruction of the Essene community. To be more specific, the book smacks of a belief in incarnational theology, that God could become man, something Orthodox Jewish theology rejects, even though its setting is the antediluvian age. After Jesus and the rise of Christianity, Jewish scholars dismissed any notion that the Messiah could be divine. He was uniquely anointed by God, but his essence was human and not divine. Enoch's vision of the end times is remarkable in that it confirms many of the main contentions Christians make about events of the Great Tribulation period and how the final act of humanity plays out. It's fascinating how it's specifically addressed to the elect of God, who will be living in the end time tribulation, when the world will experience great devastation. This notion of the elect was a phrase used by Jesus and his apostles. As I mentioned earlier, it's so translated in the Old Testament in only 4 places, and all of these are within Isaiah. Isaiah 4:21 states, "Behold my servant whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him, and he shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles." This passage certainly refers to the Messiah and his mission to Gentiles. Here the Messiah is seen as God's elect, but Israel can also be called God's elect. "For Jacob, my servant's sake, and Israel, mine elect, I have been called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me," quoting Isaiah 45:4. "And I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob, and out of Judah, an inheritor of my mountains, and mine elect shall inherit it, and my servants shall dwell there," quoting Isaiah 65:9. Likewise, another verse from Isaiah seems to refer to the Jewish people, but at a very special point in time. "They shall not build, and another inhabit. They shall not plant, and another eat. For as the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands," quoting Isaiah 65:22. In all cases we see the term elect referring to the Messiah or Israel during the Messianic kingdom. For Enoch to begin his book "to the elect" indirectly connects him to an audience living just before the kingdom and therefore at the time of Earth's great tribulation. This is an indirect way to corroborate his direct statement regarding to whom he is speaking and at what time they live upon the earth. Consistency contributes to authenticity. Enoch promises the elect that the ungodly will be eliminated altogether from the world. So stand strong. At this same time, God will walk upon the earth. 10,000 saints, no doubt a number signifying a countless contingent, will come with the Lord to execute judgment. In Jude, we read his reference, "And Enoch also, the 7th from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches, which ungodly singers have spoken against him." That's verses 14 and 15. Implied in this passage is the division of humanity into 3 distinct groups. First, the saints that come with the Lord, then the believing who will inherit the kingdom, and then the unbelievers who will be taken out of the earth and cast into outer darkness and into the lake of fire. Regarding speaking against the Lord, well, it's not surprising, taking the Lord's name in vain and doing evil in the name of God are extremely bad things to have on our record. God told me to do it. Did he? What? To murder someone? To lie about someone? To slander someone? Right. But I find it interesting how we get these modern day Pharisees saying about you can't look at this and you can't listen to that. Well, what did Jesus say about the subject? He said it's not what goes into a person that defiles them, it's what comes out of them. You know, going back to the human heart, who can understand? As he says, you know, what comes out of the human heart? Slander, lies, yeah, you know, murmurings, yeah, you know, envy, bitterness, nastiness, you know. Like people, you know, take it out on others, don't they? That things aren't going well from, so they then make someone else's life a misery, yeah, you know. sometimes, their conscience is pricked and they actually apologise. Oh, I'm sorry. They say I'm having a bad day. But even if you are having a bad day, that doesn't justify making someone else suffer, does it? Why are you having a bad day? Is it because you've walked so far away from the Lord? You know what I mean? That you don't have His guidance and protection anymore, and that's why things are becoming so bad. But even God says He doesn't promise you a rose garden. That because we live in this unpredictable and wicked world, as it says, time and unforeseen circumstances. You may well be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And going back to the poor Sophie Lancaster, I guess her and her boyfriend were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They just happened to be walking through, and this gang who were fueled up on alcohol and so on, and no doubt pumped up because they'd been having a bit of sex as well. Decided, oh, let's attack the weirdos. But you see, then I was talking about the red and black, wasn't I? Maybe she attracted dark forces because of the wearing of the red and black. I mean, many black folk tend to do it, and I think to myself, well, why are you wearing red and black? I pointed it out to a couple when I was in Oklahoma, and interested whether they actually acted or not. But the father actually seemed to think that they were made a lot of sense in it, because I said, why is your son wearing black and red check shirt? Do you not know the connotations between red and black? And I think I mentioned pretty much which I've just mentioned now. The links, and he seemed to be quite taken aback by it, and it wasn't like as if I was saying, oh, I was just saying, be discerning, think about this, I mean, yes, I wear red and I sometimes wear black, but I certainly don't wear the colours together. I mean, I don't know whether I've told you about this before, but I did actually, fraternise with a witch, yeah. Now, she initially presented herself as a white witch, and she took advantage of at that time, which I'd been for some years, and as I said, seeking the truth, seeking knowledge and so on, and she tried to lead me to the dark side, so to speak. I mean, she actually gave me a satanic Bible. I mean, I can't remember much of it now, but I remember there was all these spells and stupidity, something like having to bury silver in the garden at the north point of the compass on a full moon, and I mean, the one I do remember was the self-blessing one, and I was thinking, yeah, see, it's all about self, isn't it? It's all about the ego. It's all about me, and that was the thing where you stood in a ring of salt, and then you said these Roman words. I think, what was it now? That's it, Pax, Sax, Serax, whatever that means. I mean, I know Pax means peace, but I don't know what Sax and Serax means, but and you had to say that I think it was 3 times at the 4 points of the compass, yeah, so north, south, east, and west. Whether that made any difference, I don't know. I mean, because I then was told by people who professed to be psychically aware that I had this tulpa, or what should we say, this black shape that was with me wherever I went. And but speaking of the red and black, I mean, I remember I just experimented. I wore red and black one day, and I remember that's right, because I went to Records and Tape Exchange in Notting Hill. I was trying to sell some records, and I went in there, and of course they offering stupid money and so on. And I thought, well, these are quite unique 70s records, which I thought they were anyway at the time. I mean, maybe they weren't, I don't know, but I mean, I had things like Gong and all that sort of thing, and Shocking Blue, and which I didn't think were, I mean, yes, okay, it was a big hit, but I don't think people actually, I don't know how many people bought the album at home, but I thought it was worth something. But anyway, yeah, and I didn't realise, I think the kid was Jewish, but I remember coming out of the store and moaning and saying, I think I said to him in part, I said, I wouldn't go in there because you won't get a fair price, you know what I mean? And he actually said, well, what have you got? You know what I mean? And he actually asked what records I was trying to sell, and I showed him, and I can, sadly, there was one in there, what was it, World at War, if you remember that was a BBC radio series, and I had this record. I can't remember how I got hold of it, but I had this record, and it had a picture of Hitler on it, and I think it was one of his speeches on there and so on, with a possible translation, I don't know, but anyway, I know he looked a bit when he saw that, and on reflection, I remember that I wonder why he was shaking a lot, as if he was shaking in fear. Anyway, he was definitely interested in the Shocking Blue, and and I thought it was amazing. I don't know whether it was fear of me or what, but I said to him, look, I said I'm really glad. I said, look, do you mind if I actually get this thing on cassette? I said, and I'll send you the record, which I did, if I remember correctly, because I know I certainly don't have it in my collection anymore, so, whether I forgot to send it to him but anyway, yes, so I think he paid me for it, and then, that's what I, if I recall, that's what I did, So there you go. I mean, having personal experience of what happens when you wear red and black, and like women, isn't it? I think they call power dressing, where a woman will wear red when she wishes to make a strong impression at a social gathering or a business meeting or whatever. Like so, there could well be something in it, Anyway, going back to the matter at hand. So as such, the verse implies a particular cosmology of sorts at the end of time. Some of the elect have been transformed into saints and are capable of moving between heaven and earth. Some of the elect still live on the earth with standard equipment on board. They haven't been transformed into immortal persons and are earthbound. Finally, at the beginning of the kingdom, anyone who does not belong to this exclusive club, the elect, will be eliminated. The ungodly will not inherit the Messiah's kingdom. Now, I know some out there go, oh yes, but God is such a loving God. I can't believe in a God that will send people to hell. Well, no, because He's given us the freedom of choice, and we either choose to send ourselves to hell, or the exact opposite. Choose to trust in Him and give Him thanks and praise and acknowledge Him in all our ways. As it is written, it says, give glory to Him in all things you do, even in eating and drinking. I mean, how many people do that? I wonder. Yeah, I mean. Back in the days, people used to say grace before they had a meal, but and I must admit, I'm guilty of it. I tend to wander by mistake, as the saying goes, and I'm not trying to quote a Sisters of Mercy record there, in case you're wondering. That I just hope that he is merciful. I think what He loves more, as it says, He loves a humble, thankful heart. So I think that's what it's going to be. How do you plead? I'll have to say, well, Lord, guilt is charged, but please have mercy on me, And if He says no, no, what can I do? All I can do is I can be like, think about this, yeah? Think how certain human beings, when they've had a relationship with God, they've actually managed to change God's mind on things like. Now, I'm not saying He's going to change His mind for everyone, because I believe that there will be some wicked people who'll be defiant to the end. Going back to what I said about that guy, on one of my last posts, who declared, he said, that's the God you serve. Well, I don't want to be, I don't want to know Him, because all I was asking Him to do was to acknowledge, to say, look, tell the world, it's through Yeshua that you are able to do these things, that none of your, it's nothing to do with your effort whatsoever, and He publicly, globally, because so when it's on the internet, it's global, isn't it, to a certain extent, said no, He would not do that. Defiant to the end, you see. Maybe God will move His heart, or maybe God will raise up circumstances, because I hear at the moment, things are not well. They've had attempted attacks by a witch doctor and his gang to try and snatch some of the children. So as I said to a brother, I said maybe the Lord is removing His protective hedge. The feeble and perverse ways He was trying to justify this. He said religion killed Jesus. No, it didn't. Jesus Himself said. He said, I laid down my life. But of course He actually tells the world that as far as He's concerned, He doesn't believe in the Christ of the Bible. Well, there is no other. Like what Paul said. He said, if anyone comes to you teaching a doctrine contrary to the one that you've heard from us, because obviously Paul's saying he's heard it from God Himself. Remember he spent 3 years in Saudi Arabia with Jesus, before he started his ministry. So, anyway, I can see the time is getting on, and I'd like to get to the end of this. So let's continue. My wife, that's the author by the way, frequently reminds friends that if they ever go to the mill, go with a really bad person. What's the point? It refers to Jesus' teaching in Matthew 24 and 40-42. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. The moral of the story: better to be the one the Lord selects to enter into the kingdom. This is not a good time to be outstanding in your field. You may be left standing alone. The passage in Enoch predicting how the Lord will come with 10,000 of His saints to execute judgments repeats the same concept from other Hebrew prophets who also lived hundreds of years before the time of Christ. Here are some examples. From Isaiah 13:3 we read, I have commanded my sanctified ones, I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger, even them that rejoice in my highness. And in Joel 3:11 we read, Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. In Daniel 7:13, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And in Matthew 24:30, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. It is also important that we learn the meaning of Enoch's mysterious vanishing. While Enoch's book discusses many topics which we don't have time to cover here, such as the Watchers and the Nephilim, we will touch on his disappearing act. It reinforces several points we made in the last chapter. Now, if you want to learn about that, go buy the book. One of Enoch's fascinating accounts is his whirlwind tour of the earth from a flying vehicle. Enoch describes angels which escort him to heaven and guide him on this tour. Not only did Enoch travel around the world, we also learn that he moved to and fro between heaven and earth. Significantly, one of his rides was a one-way ticket to heaven. Only Elijah the prophet experienced the same type of trip on his journey upstairs, which was precisely in the form of a real whirlwind ride. See 11 Kings 2:11. Sorry, 2 Kings 2:11. But don't be distressed. Neither experienced death. We learn from both Moses and the writer to the Hebrews, and tradition states that the author was Paul the Apostle, that Enoch was a righteous man who walked with God. Because of this righteousness, God took him. Paul says it this way, By faith Enoch was translated, that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased God. Quoting Hebrews 11:5. Just as the rapture is described as snatching up or catching up in the twinkling of an eye, so God's grab of Enoch seems to be an event happening in a split second. M.R. Dehan of 1891 and 1965 was a great old-time evangelical preacher. He was a founder of the Radio Bible class and a scholar who wrote many pamphlets as well as a mere 25 books, many of which focused on the second coming of Christ. It was Dehan's view that Enoch embodied a foreshadowing of what happens to the church, that's true believers, before the time of tribulation, also known as the Great Tribulation. Just as in the days of Noah, there will be three groups of people, that's God's people, which pass through the judgment, that's Noah and his family representing the Jewish people, unbelievers who perish during the judgment, those who scoffed in Noah's time and again in the future, Great Tribulation, who will be removed from the earth in an undesirable manner, and three, the believers, that's the saints who please God, like Enoch, and are translated before the judgment commences. Being righteous in God's eyes, since they embrace the salvation Jesus Christ offers by his substitutionary atonement, they've been removed from the earth before the Great Tribulation, the time of judgment, which is equivalent to Enoch being taken before the Great Flood in Dehan's analogy. As we discussed many times before in this book, God removes his righteous ones before he sends judgment. Here is yet another plain example of God's preservation of his saints. Few prophecies are the subject of as much derision as the concept of the rapture of Christians, but the story of Enoch points out several interesting concepts that substantiate why the rapture is no pipe dream. The rapture is not without precedent. Enoch was taken by God and did not experience death, just as Elijah was taken up by the whirlwind. It had happened before. It can and will happen again. The translation of Enoch is connected to the flood of Noah and should be included in the epoch Jesus implies when he speaks of, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. Both of these experiences are unique times of judgment. God is directly intervening in the affairs of men. There are many attributes that these epochs share, but a rapture of the righteous is certainly one of them. Enoch prophesies the coming of God, the mighty one from heaven, who comes to earth with 10,000 of his saints. It's intriguing, no small coincidence, that the first prophet to predict the rapture was the first person to experience it. Since coincidence is a word that doesn't exist in the Hebrew Bible, we can assume this connection is no coincidence either. I could go on, but I've likely digressed too much already. One of the Bible's most amazing psalms is Psalm 139. The psalm speaks of God's foreknowledge, his knowing beforehand about every aspect of our lives. God knows where we are all the time. We can't escape his presence no matter where we go in the world. Before we speak, God knows what we are going to say. Additionally, the psalmist relates that God thinks about the psalmist, King David as it was in this case, far more than the psalmist thinks about God. We read, How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God! How great is the sum of them! If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. When I wake, I am still with thee. Quoting verses 17 and 18. We learn our very form and features are all part of God's plan for us. Perhaps the most staggering thought is to learn God picked out a specific time in the history of the world for our life to be lived. The fact that we live during the 21st century is no accident. And in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, and when as yet there was not one of them. Quoting verse 16. God knows the book of our lives from cover to cover. He knows how the story concludes before the moment we are born. Nothing is left to chance, and yet we are free to make choices and are responsible for the decisions we make. As we approach the final days of our lives on earth, especially as the times grow tougher and the ominous portents signalling the end become history, it's crucial we remember this amazing truth. Days gone by, whether easy or hard, are in God's pre-written biography of each of us. Today's experience is in the plan of God too. Likewise, the days which lie ahead are just as foreordained as the moments already past. Moments we know in our heart testify to God's providence. Whenever despair or fear grips us, we should recall God has brought us each step of the way so far and will bring us the rest of the way home. The book of Jeremiah discloses one of the most comforting verses in the Bible. This book tells a story of a greatly revered prophet living just prior to the captivity of the whole Hebrew nation of Judah in the 6th century BC. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, busied himself carting off the Jews to Babylon. This was not a highlight in Jewish history, it was the very worst of times. Yet there was hope. The New American Standard Version translates Jeremiah 20:19 with these words, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope." The King James Version brings a different sense to the meaning of Jeremiah. "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." However, Bible translators choose to express it. The message is clear. God thinks about us constantly. God remembers his plan. He continuously thinks good thoughts towards us, assuring that our end happens just as expected. God is our Father. Perhaps the most powerful statement in the entire Bible illustrating that God's providence is a personal matter concerns Noah's time in the ark. When Noah was being tossed to and fro by the greatest storm in the history of the world, as he was puzzling over whether the ark was sufficiently waterproof and stout enough to withstand the raging tempest, he could have assumed the worst. Maybe God carefully oversaw the ark's loading, but overlooked the treacherous voyage, forgetting about all the inhabitants within. After all, how could God's plan include the horrifically scary sounds, the creaking, and the threat Noah's ark would be torn apart? If Noah only considered his circumstances solely relying upon sense data, it would have been logical to figure his family would face the same fate as the rest of humanity, now drowned in the devastating floodwaters beating up against the side of his giant boat. But the Bible clearly calmly asserts the basis for Noah's assurance. And God remembered Noah, and every living thing, and all the cattle that was within him in the ark, quoting Genesis 8:1. And God remembered Noah. The Lord was thinking about every creature, big or small, whether superbly human or a mere creepy crawler. He kept watch, making sure that each and every one was safe and dry. Just like Jesus said, every hair on your head is numbered, quoting Matthew 10:30. God's providence is personal. Surely, Noah remembered God too, and realized despite the fright the animals and his family experienced, they all remained safe, being held firmly in the arms of the Almighty God. Noah knew God's plan would not be thwarted. God knows the end at the beginning. He sees the day we will join him, even if we can't see at such a time in the midst of today's troubles. And God is fully capable of assuring, no matter what end he has in mind, it will come to pass, exactly, in every detail, just the way he planned. That's why it's good to recall, despite the worst things we can imagine, nothing can confront us except, first, God filters it through his fingers. As Paul reminds us in Romans 8:35-39, "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, For thy sake we are killed all the day long, we are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." To paraphrase Paul's admonition, whatever we experience at this time or anything in the future is powerless to separate us from the love of God. We have that promise. As the days progress, we will be challenged to remember this promise, even as God remembers each one of us. Likewise, we will not lack our daily bread. The provision he refuses refreshes every day, pledging to meet our most urgent needs. God is always attentive to his children. He knows the end from the beginning. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Quoting Isaiah 46, 9 and 10. God's plan will out, whether we're talking the whole world or just one small solitary life of his select. God has a plan for each of us, and he continues to monitor the plan every day. Here's something for further thought, yeah? Do we believe our lives are already anticipated by God fully, such that despite what the future holds, he will lead us to the finish line? As the song Amazing Grace expresses, if God has brought us safe thus far, will he lead us home? Do we trust what God has in store for us? Has anything happened to you in these more turbulent times causing you to stretch your faith? Do you like living in times when your faith must be exercised? If you agree that God knows your future, does it encourage you to believe that he can help you endure no matter what may come? What are some of your favourite Bible verses or stories which assure you of God's love and plan for your life? And there's the offer, yeah? Leave it in the comment section, and I will read it and I will respond, as other people who have done so can attest to. I'm not one of these people that, forget and don't bother to respond, yeah? Sometimes I overlook things, yes, but if I come across something, I will always respond to it. Be assured, yeah? Because I don't want to dishonour my God. I want to show him to you out there, even through this computer, yeah? So may my awesome and powerful God, who is in control of all things, bless you, guide you, and protect you. All he requires of you is a humble, thankful heart. On that note, I'll say bye for now.